have with us today Mr. Curtis Grad. He is the Chief Executive and Founding Partner of Modalis Infrastructure, a strategic investment and professional advisory services company specializing in international transport infrastructure, privatization, investment, development, operation, and business intelligence. During his 25-plus years career in the transportation infrastructure sector, he has led extensive change management, redevelopment projects, various international airports, vertiports, and port facilities worldwide, spanning Canada, Jamaica, Cyprus, Jordan, and Panama. We have with us as well Ersin Inankul, who is also my colleague in Jacobs. He's heading the Aviation Digital. He is an airport technology leader who has successfully led over 22 airport projects, from managing design, implementation, integration of system and operational readiness, and airport transport in Turkey, Tunisia, and the Middle East. He excels in strategic planning and leadership, technology upgrades, program management, change management. Ersin was the Chief Digital and Commercial Officer in Istanbul Airport. Lastly, we have Pedro Agas, who is a Principal in Transportation and Infrastructure at Kearney, Middle East. He has more than 10 years' experience in strategy consulting at Kearney across Europe and the Middle East. He has focused on development of advanced air mobility ecosystems, engaging with private and government entities involved in the different elements of the sector, understanding the key challenges and sizing the underlying opportunities. Before we dive into the conversation, I'll take a moment just to set the scene and highlight the significance of the topic today. The world has collectively embraced the target of achieving carbon neutrality by 2050. There is a surge in initiatives within the domains of transportation and infrastructure, where the commitment of decarbonization has become crucial for both environmental bodies, governmental bodies, and private sector. In recent years, the focus has significantly shifted toward urban mobility as a core element of the decarbonization urban mobility. This typically revolves around electric and hydrogen power urban transport, electric vehicles, and similar solutions. Today, we're shifting our attention to urban mobility in aviation, a relatively recent concept that emerged with the introduction of eVTOLs. These vehicles are driven by electric motors, making them much quieter and environmentally friendly compared to conventional airplanes and helicopters. Potential applications of eVTOLs are diverse, ranging from urban passenger transport to medical and cargo delivery, but our primary focus today will be on public transportation. Over the past decade, eVTOL projects have multiplied from startups to listed companies with large budget financed by private investment. Some of these projects aims to become operational for public use as early as 2024, provided that necessary regulations and permits are in place. At the same time, the development of infrastructure related to this innovative concept of urban air mobility, including vertiport, is commencing in various urban and airport settings. So let's dive into this exchange of ideas, and I'll begin the panel discussion on eVTOLs and their advantages. So first, Pedro, can you please describe the status of development of urban air mobility? What are the technological advances in eVTOLs, and where do we stand in terms of regulation and even standards?
Sure, thank you. First of all, and good afternoon, everyone. eVTOLs come from the fact that we have seen a number of technologies evolving in the recent years, electrical technologies especially. In essence, the reason why we will be able to be using them in the next years to move from somewhere in the city to another point in the city is because their noise emission is much lower than an helicopter, and this is one of the areas that has improved a lot across the last years. Actually, Volocopter, which is one of the leading OEMs, has in its aircraft less than 65 decibels at 75 meters, which is something that is really not annoying in a city. And also, probably the most important point, and where there is still significant room to grow, is on the technology of the battery. Currently, 30 to 40% of the weight is the battery. That limits a lot the range, and of course limits the distance and the number of people that can be in one of these vehicles. We have seen last week some positive news. So the first eVTOL in the world to get type certification by a national aviation authority was EHang, which is autonomous two-seater. And I would say we are still in an initial stage. We only have one type certified one type certified aircraft. The regulations for flight operations, for personnel licensing, for airworthiness are still under development. And actually, one of the areas where standards will play an important role is in helping the development of these regulations, because regulations nowadays are being done in a much more less prescriptive and more, let's say, flexible way, relying on standards. This is why ASTM and other these standard design organizations are playing a key role. But yeah, I think I would say that regulation is one of the key pillars that is still under development, and that over the next few years we will have to see some progress here for this to become a reality.
Yeah, thank you. Curtis, what are the trends of the leading company in this in eVTOLs in this market, and who are the players, who are the stakeholders? How do you think the projects are financed?
So I guess I'll start by trying to address it on the North American context, where I'm much closer to home. So we've been involved with supporting Ferrovial and others getting established in the North American market, specifically in Florida, and getting that private sector investment in studying and understanding what is required for a vertiport network is being built in parallel with regulations for aircraft and airspace that haven't been settled yet. So the players, a lot of them are sitting back waiting for others to do the work so that they can actually go out and develop their specifications and their business cases. But if you look at in the North American environment, where it's really most advanced is in South Florida, but it's a very different environment, and maybe we'll talk about that a little bit later. But where you've got multi-jurisdictional environments, it's very different than in an area where the market is controlled more or less by one level of government. So it'd be good to maybe explore that in a bit as well. But in the North American context, it really is Florida. That's where most of it's happening. But I think, Pedro might have some thoughts about this part of the world.
You can give us a regional context as well.
Yeah, I think on the Middle East, we have seen actually I was going to say years, but even 2 weeks ago, we saw some interesting news of Archer, one of the leading American OEMs, striking a deal and getting some support from the actually Abu Dhabi government and Abu Dhabi sovereign wealth fund, Mubadala. They have this plan to launch commercial operations in 2026 in Abu Dhabi. And this is just to basically highlight or picture the progress and the level of engagement and dynamism that it's taking place in the Middle East. But if we move a bit north, for instance, in KSA, we have seen last year MOUs and LOIs, for instance, between the helicopter company and Airbus, between Saudia, the airline, and Lilium for the potential acquisition of 100 units. So I would say that there is a large number of stakeholders. If you want to develop a national strategy for advanced air mobility, which is something that I think eventually every nation will need to end up doing if they are not doing it already, you need to engage with public and private authorities from a very multidisciplinary, from a large number of multidisciplinary areas.
Thank you, Pedro. My question now to Ersin, do you think that the system, the air control traffic, are ready to welcome these eVTOLs?
Yeah, it's a great question.
Ersin,
$1 billion question.
I think you need to put on this.
Yeah, it's a great question. Good afternoon, everyone. This is one of the key issue that we already working on it. Everybody's working on it about the system side, because at the end of the day, the airports already successfully engage with the land side, air side integration somehow. But most of the airport has now primary radars, secondary radars. Like they already have the automatic instrument landing systems. They're already making like automatic clearance from the tower, or they already success to make turnaround of the aircraft fully automated. And now in 2025, most of the airports just thinking about how they're going to be enhance this process for increasing or the on-time performance for the departure and arrival. But it took 80 years, right, to be at this level on this stage. For eVTOLs, there's gonna be a little bit more difficult, but not impossible. Why? Because the eVTOLs at the end of the day is the smart devices that already have a lot of sensors in it, like ultrasonic sensors, radars, cameras. They have their own ADS-B antennas. They already have their transponders like aircraft. The standard airports ATC towers with their environments then can communicate easily with them with the UHF and VHF infrastructure. And for the radar, they can see them with the call sign, and they can understand where they are, how's their speed, what is the altitude. But the struggling issue and the challenging is the urban mobility, because they're gonna fly at the lower level. They're gonna be pass through the buildings. The normal aircraft is just passing through the 10,000 meters, and the radar is already getting this information from the 200 miles. Last approach is going to be 25 miles, and then you're going to be transition this aircraft to instrument landing system and landing automatically. What will going to happen? These eVTOLs, we're going to use inside the city their own capabilities, because this device is the smart device. They have AI capabilities, they have gyroscopes, they have their own radars, lidars, and they're already making their own 3D mapping when they are going the way, and they're going to be capable to share this information through their AOCC, their operation centers. Whatever you building a new vertiports, or you're already extending small vertiports to one of the airports, these devices will gonna be capable to communicate with this one. And the challenge and the new opportunities is we all talk about the hardwares, but software part, because the new air traffic management platforms is gonna be handled to manage all this complexity. Like they're gonna be communicate with the airside, ground operations, all the radars, and all the sensors from the hardwares, OEMs, to integrate with this data and exchange with the related parties. This is now going very like $15 billion. Startups already working on this just platforms. Everybody's now start talking about this platform because this is going to be happen. It's coming. 2026, the first commercial is going to be happening in the UAE, and all of these startups and the softwares, the companies now focusing on this business.
Yeah. Pedro, my question now touching about this complex process or the efforts done by everyone. Like, is eventually this mode of transport will be adopted by everyone, or it will be like limited to, let's say, rich people, like from a pricing and affordability perspective?
So I think that's a key point to the success of urban air mobility. For urban air mobility to really be adopted by a significant portion of the citizenship, we need it to be convenient, and we need it to be affordable. And I think the convenience, considering its characteristics, it's no one doubts about it. Where there is more skepticism is on the affordability. And the question is, are we building here a toy for the rich? Are we just electrifying helicopters, or will this be something that can compete in price with a hail ride or a car? And I think in the early stages, while we still don't reach autonomous operations, or manufacturing is not scaled, where the throughput of the vertiports is still not high enough to amortize those costs across a large number of trips, this is going to be something that not many people will be able to afford. But the objective, and I think here is where there is an important factor to consider in the PPP characteristic of the infrastructure, is that this eventually should be something that OEMs are targeting to price below $100 for an average urban ride. For this, a number of things have to happen, and I guess we will have to wait a few years to see this happening. But once this happens, then is when we're going to start to see pressure being taken off the roads, improvements in the quality of the air, social mobility. So I think that is where the game changer comes, and it will depend on many things, like the ability of the OEMs to bring autonomous aircraft to certification and to operations, and also to the convenience of this mode of transport, which will rely on a very dense network of vertiports. Otherwise, we're not really replacing any road transport.
Thank you, Pedro. My question now to Curtis. I mean, for us to eventually talk about financing, potential financing of eVTOLs through PPPs, I'd like to talk more about the infrastructure. And the infrastructure for eVTOLs are called vertiports. And I'd like to, maybe you can explain more on the vertiport networks. I think the challenge now is in really designing these networks, like to accommodate like typologies of eVTOL sizing and different types. I'm not sure if this is also related to the delay in the regulations and the specifications from the governments as well, to be able to define like specific specifications for these vertiports.
So I think the challenge is each one of these vertiport networks in an urban area, they're going to serve a market. And as Pedro has alluded to, you're competing against ground traffic. It's not a competition of aviation modes. And developing the right infrastructure, some of these first vertiports, when they were first being designed, they were talking $20, $30 million per vertiport. Well, when you're trying to recover that investment, not even to talk about the airplanes yet, but the physical infrastructure, when you're hauling 4 revenue passengers at a time, it's going to be a very challenging business model unless you get the infrastructure right. So you may have a hub that has a central location where most of your flights may be coming in and out. But if you've got a network of, say, 10, 15 vertiports in an urban area, you're going to have differing levels of service. And those differing levels of service will have to be contributing to an overall network that is sustainable. If we have to charge $50 a passenger just for the infrastructure, but you're only able to charge $100 for the ticket, there's not much left for the aircraft. There's not much left for air traffic control and all the other things that will be put into it. So this is going to be a very interesting and delicate balance of getting the right sized infrastructure, but also figuring out how to implement it across multiple jurisdictions. And again, in UAE, you may end up having common jurisdiction of the national government, but in a place like Paris or Florida, you may end up having your vertiports in 10 different municipalities. So trying to figure out how to build that infrastructure efficiently, but also with the right regulatory, local regulatory controls being managed, that's what's going to drive up the cost. And the business case has to be very strong in terms of keeping the cost per passenger down. It's a very similar model to airports, except it's multiple airports in one network, but it's the same challenge.
Thank you. Adding to the infrastructure, I want to touch a bit on the systems. And Ersin, since you're a specialist in integration systems, what do you think the main challenges in implementation of the vertiports, like in the future?
Yeah, I mean, the technical, when you have a look with the technical part, the most investment is also coming from this infrastructure. I mean, the smart infrastructure, because you're going to be need a powerful charging infrastructure. Plus, we're now talking about the hybrid solutions like hydrogen. Is going to be also keeping hydrogen, storing hydrogen is going to be also another, or distributing this one is going to be also a challenging for these vertiports. When you have a compare with the airports, it's also same, like you're going to have the final approach touchdown area we call FTO. You're going to be make lighting for that one, and you have to put a digital meteorological system to engage with the. You're going to have like remote tower solution to integrate with some of the messaging through the OEMs, and you have to be put integrated airport operation. I mean the vertiport operation center. Like this is gonna be like a smart center should be watch carefully because we are not talking about we are now talking about 1 or 2 devices, but think about that in the same corridors, 100 devices going and getting back, and this is not gonna be need like some of the capacity and balancing issue, and this smart operation center should be placed inside the vertiports to monitor and manage everything. Like the aircraft operations, this device is going to be send the information from source to destinations, like their, how many passengers they have, where is their destination, how they, if it's going to be at the future, it's going to be autonomous, it should be automatic. And this information should be real time, placed and sent and received from the operation centers. And the second challenge for vertiports, the changing for the customer experience, because we were going to talk about fully digital journey. The like boarding or getting the ticketing is going to be through all mobile. Mobility is going to be enhanced. You're going to be see or track your devices from there, and the security issue will be there. You have to be screen the passengers' bag, and this is also be another issue for the security perspective. But at the end of the day, these buildings like smaller airports, but smarter than the heliports. But it's gonna be like if you're gonna interconnect with each other, like 5 or 6 of them at the same time, then the complexity of the data exchange will gonna be coming up. Like if you're gonna be put one operator with one vertiport, is fine. But think about 4 or 5 operators at the same time would like to operate. They have their own hardware, they have own platforms, they have own their customer engagement, they have own their mobility platform. You have to handle somehow all of them at the same time. This should be some of the key challenging, but a lot of work is ongoing. At Vancouver, there is examples. Now there is a project is going to be finalizing at 2024 at UAE. And Brazil has one example, and Saudi is also preparing themselves for creating like 3 or 4 in the last 2 to 3 years, and we're also working on that one. This is going to be a solving issue.
Well, thank you, Ersin. I think we've discussed now designing and implementing infrastructure needed for eVTOLs and vertiports, which might be from a private side. I'd like to now shift to other perspective. Talking from a public perspective, like how the public sector is perceiving these eVTOLs, and especially when it comes to adopting this mode of transport as a real urban mode of transport, especially when it comes to areas where other mode of transport are there, like coexisting with, I don't know, maybe light rails as well. So Pedro, would you like to touch a bit on this?
Yeah, I think what Ersin described in the last couple of minutes already shows the level of complexity of this type of infrastructure that has to account for the integration with the airspace, with the land side, has to account for potential retrofits in the future if the source of fuel is going to be hydrogen eventually, which will allow for longer range, but we're not going to see it in a number of years. And an additional level of complexity, as you mentioned, is the integration with the existing modes of transport. In the end, and by the way, this is a key advantage of the Middle East, that we see so many greenfield projects where this integration is going to be much easier because the master plans are being developed now versus the integration in Paris or in cities, the mature developed cities in the US and the UK. In the end, we have to think what are going to be the useful modes of transport that should be integrated with eVTOLs. For instance, a metro or a bus station shouldn't be the priority, considering that the difference in price tickets won't attract the same type of passenger to a metro station and to an eVTOL. But for instance, with the airports, with high-speed rail stations, or places where they can switch from an eVTOL to ground transportation by taking an Uber, for example, that type of integration is something that needs to be at the core of the infrastructure planning, and is actually something that is being considered today when we work with authorities on the development of this network, on the planning of this network.
Thank you, Pedro. I think eventually for this mode of transport to be a trusted mode, there should be like some actions to be taken, like for the to gain this trust from the public side and from the public users as well. So this is something we were discussing earlier. Like, what do you think, like the efforts that should be done from the public side and also from the private side to gain this trust?
Well, it's going to come down to the first trials that when a country or a market starts to develop, there'll be probably just point to point. It'll be one or two vertiports where it's proof of concept, it's being developed. And as it becomes more prevalent, just like anything else, it will become more accepted. It's like autonomous vehicles. Most people in the room will probably be uncomfortable sitting in an autonomous vehicle today, but I guarantee you in 10 years from now, you'll be much more comfortable with it. And I think autonomous vehicles are going to give us a lot more of a helping hand getting to the acceptance of eVTOLs, because they will be kind of blazing the trail for us. But if you think about, we talk about the technology side, these are going to be autonomous vehicles with a pilot. The pilot is not going to be doing much because these aircraft are so heavily engineered with the technology. Yes, the pilot will be on board, but the comfort level will be coming in the use cases and getting people to test it, just like anything else. Like when Uber first came out, a lot of people were resistant to take Uber. I'm going to get in a car with a stranger? 10 years ago, it was unthinkable. Now it's just natural, and I think it's the same evolution. You're going to see other people that that have done it. You're going to see it run successfully. God forbid there will be incidents that will cause concern for people, but as it becomes more prevalent, it'll become more accepted, and 10 years from now, it will be autonomous. That's my view.
Ersin, being a board member of the ACI, what do you think, like the efforts done from their side as well to make this happen, like successfully?
Yeah, I mean, I'm also the working group with ACI, World Technology Group. Not only for the ACI, also ICAO, Eurocontrol, and FAA is also working a lot about that. And the last 10 years, it was just is a concept, but last 2 and 3 years, this become like FAA already make a great documentation at end of 2022 called 105 is already describe what kind of vertiports should be there, how the technology and what kind of the minimum technology should be placed in the vertiports, and then Eurocontrol also ESA also already sit and discuss and make like workshop with the 5 or 6 times and already create a great documentation about how they're gonna be integrated vertiports is gonna be work, what should be the design, even the marking on the ground is already defined. But at the end of the day, it's the regulations is like this is the newest technology and this is the two technology. It's gonna be affect everybody and everything. It's gonna be affect with the airports, airlines, especially for the private jets, and this should be when you're gonna discuss, sit with all stakeholders and make a decision and get a decision together. And what all the government is also doing, like UAE, this is all starting from the we calling POC, like test pads. If you are creating something, if you already make a project and if you already define your flight path, you already put your O&M on place, you already exchanging the data, you already success to communicate with the devices, you already success with the landing and takeoff, then let's make a test. Then put your last procedures on that one. This is another methodology.
So vertiport networks first, and if the eVTOLs could be included, yes or no. I know that, Curtis, you've been engaged in several airport PPPs, like many years ago. Do you see any opportunities for PPPs when it comes to this particular subject?
So a little bit earlier, I was saying that the skill sets and the things we've learned about airports are very applicable to vertiports. But as a network, the challenge becomes, and the people in this room are interested in PPPs. PPPs usually start with a grant. What is the grant? What is the government granting as a right? And usually in an airport's case, it's a patch of land that you're given the grant or the right to develop that airport. You've got an exclusivity, you've got a regional monopoly, for lack of a better word. And then you start to say, well, how does that apply to a vertiport network? It might work in the UAE and it might work in Saudi, where the national government controls the airspace. They control a lot of the airports and some of the land-based locations where you might be running a vertiport. So I think it works in a region like this. It's much more difficult in a place like Paris or London or South Florida. So in South Florida, they want to set up this 12 to 15 vertiport network. It's going to have 10 different municipalities that will be residing with these vertiports. So who's going to grant the right to operate this network of vertiports? Because the grant would have to come from those 10 or 12 governments that would all agree, and they never will. So in certain environments, I think you can run a PPP. If you're talking about the land-based facilities, the only other way you could do it is through somehow controlling the airspace and then granting our rights over the airspace. But I know that FAA would never give anybody a monopoly to run the airspace. It simply won't happen. So in some countries, it will happen and it is possible. But for metro cities where there's multiple jurisdictions, very hard to set up a PPP, because what do you grant as a right?
Talking about the region, I think Pedro can give us some examples, especially you're working now in Saudi on several strategies with several entities. Maybe you can touch a bit as well on the UAE.
I think, as Curtis just mentioned, probably in the Middle East it's a bit easier to see these PPP schemes taking place. First, because there is less fragmentation in the governance of the infrastructure or the airspace. I mean, there is, for instance, a recent example. No, a year ago, the Dubai South Airport granted some space, some land to vertiport developer, VPorts, for a number of decades to develop their vertiports and to test and to operate. I mean, we have also seen several examples in KSA, where in the region of NEOM, which is backed by PIF, and it's already doing several progresses in the area of vertiports. So yeah, I think in essence, in the Middle East probably there is an advantage, considering the framework of the governance. But also in Europe, for instance, we have seen in the last couple of years maybe a bit more timid examples. But for instance, in the UK there was a grant of £10 million a year ago, granted by Vertical Flight Society to a consortium led by a number of companies, including public and private, with NATS, Skyports, I believe, and a number of companies. I mean, it's probably a small step, but it sets a precedent, and it basically signals that the public authorities understand and see the potential of advanced air mobility as a contributor to public good, right? To public good, to public mobility, to public health, because eventually this is also going to be used for emergency medical services. So I think in essence, probably in the next years, we will see more and more examples of collaboration between the government and private entities to fund this infrastructure and the systems that are required to run them.
So do you think the use of the eVTOLs affect the potential of PPP as well? Like whether it's for public transport or for maybe cargo or something else?
Yeah, I mean there is uses of eVTOLs, or small UAS, no, unmanned aircraft systems, or drones, popularly named, that I think attract more interest from public authorities. No, for instance, if there was a plan to build vertiports on the different hospitals in the country to move patients from road accidents to the hospitals quickly, I think this will be something that not many stakeholders will oppose. It's something that clearly brings a lot of public good to society. Actually, in Saudi Arabia, there was a project last year between THC and one of the ministries to set a number of, not vertiports, in this case it was helipads,
Yes.
across the roads to make sure that the transport of patients between the roads and the hospitals is quickly. So maybe PPPs start in this type of use cases where there is less doubt about how, what's the level of public good of these operations, and eventually move to passenger transfer and to other use cases.
Yeah. And as we were discussing this, I'm thinking we've naturally defaulted to the idea that the private sector will run the airline part of this business. Like, it's just natural. It's an airplane. It must be run by an airline of some sort. But there may be cases where a local government or a national government decides it's an extension of the local transit system and they want to control it for a variety of reasons. And one of them may be security, because there's going to be a tremendous amount of concern about the military application or the nefarious use of those devices, and the government may decide they want to keep control of them, and it becomes an extension of a government transit system. That's probably an exception, but I'm sure there will be a few places where it happens.
And I will say, thinking of the local context here, considering the boost to the tourism sector that the governments in the GCC countries are trying to give. For instance, consider the advantages that advanced air mobility can give to tourism. First, as an attraction itself, right? One of the first use cases that eVTOLs will probably embrace is as a tourism attraction. You take a location where there is nice sightseeing, and you can, even with this small and relatively short-range eVTOLs, like the one that was certified a week ago in China, would already be almost ready to be used for this type of use case, no? But then also to move tourists from the mainland to the islands in the new giga developments in the Red Sea that are being developed, right? Or to move them between the airport and the city. So, it's not only the public advantages that advanced air mobility can have to the aviation industry per se and to the mobility sector, but also to adjacent industries like tourism or like health themselves.
Thank you. Ersin, would you like to add anything?
Just what I can say, the idea for the PPP, the airports also, just when we talk about like 20 years ago, that there were no PPP around. Now we're talking about like 4% of all global airports become the prioritized, right? And this will gonna be happen because this is a good business model. Like some of the, like UAE, they already make some commitments. The government also make commitment like 2030 or 2035. They're gonna be like 25% of their mobility. They're gonna move to air mobility from public mobility to air mobility. This is a target, right? And this will gonna be happen because the population is increased and the road infrastructure, rail infrastructure becomes extremely expensive. Everybody's just looking about this O&M for the safety perspective. But at the end of the day, this is the smart device. I mean, smarter than the helicopters, or smarter than some of the level 4 cars, because they already certified with the various companies and various government agencies. What I believe, in 5 to 10 years, this network is going to be more common. Like we're talking about now, NEOM is on the way with the 3 or 5. Now Dubai is already start for the merging. They're making a partnership with V-Ports that creating their integrated operations center. This is going to be like a guidance and the new model. And Vancouver is one example with the V-Ports also working with there, and Wallop there also working with Germany. and France also working with their environment, how they're gonna be solve issue at Paris, and all this will gonna be happen in 2-3 years, and not only for the short terms, what I believe, but with the midterms, this PPP is gonna be happen.
Thank you. I think we have 10 minutes left. Since the topic is relatively new, maybe we'd like to have some questions from the audience, potentially. I don't know if you have a mic, but let's try. Do you have questions? Go ahead.
Since we don't have a roaming mic. Okay, it's not really a PPP question, and maybe it's my ignorance, but what I've heard is that it's very difficult to certify vertiports because of their technology, that helicopters can glide down if they have a problem, but drones and whatever.
eVTOLs.
Sorry?
eVTOLs?
Yeah, eVTOLs cannot glide down if there's a technological problem, and so they cause a problem to the cities over which they might be flying. Is this true? And if helicopters have existed for decades and they haven't taken off as a mode of transport, why would non-helicopter vertical transport take off?
Okay, I can start. Or from the vertiport's perspective, there is for certification that FAA is already working with 169 that some of the vertiports already apply to get the certification, because they already define at their 105 that minimum requirements of the technical issues like instrument landing, meteorological equipments, marking, lighting, and the high density radars, and the ADS-B, and some kind of equipment list, and how they're going to be exchanged. This idea is already defined. ICAO also makes some things last year, said that this O&M, if they're going to be get certification or get the regular flights, they have to be sent this kind of information like call sign, passenger number, the passenger name, how many kilos is coming, maximum takeoff weight, some kind of information they have to send from source to destination. This is on place right now. When we have a look with the safety, these all devices, and I mean like more than 100 developments ongoing right now, but what I can say that the famous 5461 already somehow handled with this gyroscope issues, like if they're going to be shortage with the battery, they are now capable to find the flight path, because the flight path that normally aircraft is also following with the pilot or automatic, but that one is going to be with one more additional level with AI, because they're going to be learn from this flight path. When you're going to make this your flight path, then this device has capable to get this all big data and processes. The big differences between aircraft and this O&M is the data process, because they have ability they have a chipset to get this big data for terabytes and process on it, analyze on it, and make a decision. And what I believe that, I mean, the autonomous will going to be more successful, but they are capable to, if they're going to be shortage with because they have a lot of, sensors like magnitude is going to be an issue, or the bad weather conditions. They are capable to find a way to find a place to land. The second question, what's the biggest differences for me when you have a look with the decarbonized perspective? They are less noisy, and they have less carbon emissions. I mean, this is the best things that when you have a compare with the helicopters.
I just want to comment directly on Ziad's question about safety. A helicopter is designed with 15,000 moving parts trying to get away from it. Engineering-wise, it's built to fail And all the redundancies in an aircraft, a helicopter, are built to make sure it doesn't fail. But it means a Sikorsky helicopter is $15 million. The average eVTOL is going to be somewhere between 2.5 and 5 million. But it comes with, you can count the amount of moving parts on two hands. Well, not quite, but it's a very limited number of moving parts. But not every VTOL is created equal. Some of them are rotating blades, but they're multiple blades. So you might have 6 rotors, they're all independent. One fails, you still have 5. On a helicopter, you lose the engine, you lose the aircraft. But it's also full of combustible hydrocarbons. And a safety case, if you put the average helicopter that's been flying for the last 50 years versus the VTOLs, it's going to rate much safer in terms of survivability of a crash. And something as simple as glide ratio. The average glide ratio of a light engine aircraft is 6-to-1. If it's a mile in the air, it can go 6 miles to find a place to land. A helicopter is 2-to-1. It's got the glide ratio of a rock. When it loses an engine, it's got about a mile to find a place to land. And the VTOLs, and you think about Lilium, they've got 32 independent jets. If they ingest 6 birds, they still have 28 engines left to operate, and they're independent. But it also has a wing, so it can glide. Some of the designs will be more like a 3-to-1 ratio, some of them might be close to 6-to-1. And this is getting into the technical design of aircraft, but that will be a key consideration into who wins the war, who wins the race to the market. It's not just who's the most efficient, but they're going to have to pass the safety case as well.
Maybe just to add, because I think my colleagues have summarized it very well, but just to add my 2 cents on the 2 very relevant questions. I think the redundancy is clearly the difference. Like the first example that comes to my mind is the Bolo City. It's an aircraft that we will see hopefully in the Paris Olympics next summer, that will go between Charles de Gaulle and Le Bourget and a couple of other places. It has 16 rotors, so 1 or 2 failures mean that you can still land very safely. Also, the regulation, which is different in the US, in Europe, in Asia, will require this aircraft to have a percentage of buffer of battery, when they arrive to the destination. So it's not like your phone that can leave you, without battery in the middle of your journey. On the difference with the helicopter, I think it's a very important point also for the public trust. I've never been in an helicopter, for instance. I think we were discussing before the average ride between this shuttle helicopter that you have in the JFK airport in New York and Manhattan is around $500. This is expected to be, eVTOLs rides are expected to be between $200 and $100 towards the long term. Just to give you an example, in the Paris Olympics, for instance, they are targeting to price it at 110 euros, which will be heavily subsidized. But that's the objective, to be around the $100. So it should be much more affordable and available. And then, of course, the noise. I mean, it will be unthinkable to have 100 helicopters over our heads in the city. We wouldn't be able to speak in the street. However, because of the decentralized rotors in an eVTOL, the level of noise is much lower, and it makes it suitable for urban usage. So I think these are the main differences.
The example used is a VTOL is like a hairdryer, and a helicopter is like a leaf blower. Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. So from today, I understood that we are in a stage of the urban air mobility where the regulation, air regulation and aircraft certification is key. And the question is in twofold. The first one, are we expecting to reinvent the wheel of the air transportation, like back in 2016, where the government will set the rules of who is going to fly and where, who are the pricing, who are the sites, the capacity. And so we're going to go through this phase. And the second, what do you expect? What is your vision in terms of the first business model, business operation? We're talking more about an hub and spoke or point to point, where maybe the hub is going to be the main airport to connect to the intercontinental flight. How do you see that?
Yeah.
Thank you.
If I may just start, and I will hand over to you. So on the first question of the regulation, I think the points you mentioned about the regulation, I hope those are not regulated. I see them more like market questions. No, what should be the price? What should be the number of seats in one of these aircraft? And I think here we see already quite a lot of freedom because we see governments striking or stakeholders, public and private stakeholders in countries, for instance, in the Middle East, striking deals with very different types of OEMs. For instance, to go back to the example of Saudi Arabia, Saudi has an LOI with Lilium for 100 units of its Lilium jet, which is a 7-seater, and it costs several $1 million each aircraft. In NEOM, we have this joint venture between NEOM and Volocopter for a 2-seater. So I think the number of seats is going to be completely up to the OEM. Regarding the price, I mean, we still haven't seen any move towards regulating the price, but the fact that we see in the same country or even in the same city or region several players and governments allowing for several players to enter will mean that we will see competitiveness. So prices should self-regulate towards a cost plus markup. And on the second question, well, maybe I will hand over to my colleague for the first question.
I'd like to just comment on the economic regulation. I think the regulators are beyond the idea that they need to economically regulate airlines. Airports, they still want to regulate because they're a monopoly, right? But when you look at a vertiport network, it's not a monopoly in that it's still got a strong competition against ground vehicles. So I would hope most government jurisdictions will not create economic regulation, but there'll be regulation around the design of the aircraft and the manufacture of the aircraft, around the airspace and the things related to that, and of the vertiport. But I pray that governments don't try to start doing an economic regulation on something that has already got valid competition within a market. It's a different mode of transport, but it's a competition.
Thank you.
Sorry, just to address the second question, you were asking what's going to be the business model, if it's going to be hub to hub, airport to city, etc. So we are currently, for instance, assessing the market size for one of the countries in the Middle East, and we are sizing 18 different use cases of eVTOLs. We are focusing a lot here on passenger transport, but let's not forget also that this will be used for cargo transport and for last mile parcel. One of the aircraft that we expect to see certified in the next months even is a Chinese manufacturer called Autoflight with the R&D center in Europe, and it's basically for cargo. So between cargo and passenger, I think we can see definitely more than a dozen different use cases, like the ones you mentioned. So probably the first ones will be tourism, where you see less elasticity in the price, which will be important at the beginning when prices are higher. But of course, airport to city as a shuttle, eventually, point to point within the city. And once the technology allows for a lower range, and we will move maybe also to hydrogen and to other technologies, we will also see what we call regional air mobility, which means going from a city to another city, which can be also very useful, for instance, to connect cities which don't have, the proper ground infrastructure.
Thank you. I think we ran out of time. Thank you so much for attending. I want to thank also Jacques Follin, the chair of the airport chapter in MAP, who organized, initially this session. Is it working?
Can't hear.
No?
Yeah, working.
Oh,
It
okay.
is, okay.
Maybe
It's in this-
yours is not working. It's okay. And thank you so much for attending as well and sharing your experiences. Thank you all.